The entire restaurant went silent when the little boy began to cry, not a soft whimper, but the kind of soul-shaking sob that made strangers turn their heads in wonder. What tragedy could break a child so completely? Especially one dressed in clothes that cost more than most people earned in a month, sitting beside a man in a $10,000 suit who stared at his phone as if his son's tears were nothing more than background noise. Emma Rodriguez had been a waitress at the Rosewood Garden for 3 years, and she'd seen wealthy families come and go. Their children perfectly behaved and unnervingly quiet. But this was different. This 6-year-old boy with blonde hair and ocean blue eyes, wearing a crisp white shirt and gray vest, was drowning in a grief so raw it made her chest tighten as she approached the table with a tray of water glasses. And when she knelt beside him, ignoring protocol entirely, and whispered, "Hey there, sweetheart, what's wrong?" The boy looked up at her with such desperate longing that she nearly gasped. And his father, Richard Ashford, one of the wealthiest real estate moguls in the city, finally glanced up from his phone with irritation creasing his handsome but exhausted face. His dark hair touched with gray at the temples, his navy blue suit immaculate, his eyes cold as winter steel. And he said in a clipped tone, "Oliver, that's enough. People are staring." But the boy only cried harder, his small hands clutching the edge of the white tablecloth. And Emma, with her brown hair pulled back in a ponytail, her burgundy uniform and white apron, still smelling faintly of coffee and vanilla, her warm hazel eyes, full of compassion, gently touched the boy's shoulder and said, "Sometimes crying is okay, you know. Sometimes we need to let it out." And Richard's jaw tightened, but before he could speak, Oliver choked out words that shattered the air like glass. "I want my mommy. I want her back. Daddy doesn't talk about her anymore. He acts like she never existed, but I miss her. I miss her so much." And the silence that followed was deafening. The clatter of silverware and murmur of conversation around them fading into nothing as Emma's eyes filled with tears. She fought to contain, and she looked up at Richard, whose face had gone pale, his phone now forgotten, on the table, his hands clenched into fists, and she saw it then not coldness, but a man so consumed by his own grief that he'd forgotten his son was grieving too. Emma stood slowly, excusing herself to grab a glass of chocolate milk and a slice of the restaurant's famous warm apple pie, and when she returned, she set them in front of Oliver and said softly, "My mama used to tell me that the people we love never really leave us. They live right here," and she touched her heart, and here, touching her temple, in every memory, every lesson, every moment of love they gave us. And Oliver stared at her, his crying reduced to hiccups, and he whispered, "Really?" And she nodded, pulling out the chair beside him, another breach of protocol. But the manager, Mr. Henley, watched from across the room and didn't intervene, because even he could see this wasn't about rules. This was about a child in pain. And Emma sat down, asking gently, "What was your mommy's name?" And Oliver's face softened, his voice barely audible as he said, "Grace. Her name was Grace. She had yellow hair like me, and she smelled like flowers, and she used to read me stories every night. And she'd do all the voices, and she'd tuck me in and kiss my forehead and say, 'You are my greatest adventure, Oliver Ashford.' But then she got sick, and Daddy said she had to go to heaven. And that was 8 months ago, and Daddy won't talk about her. And our house is so quiet now, and I feel like I'm forgetting her voice, and I'm scared. I'm so scared I'll forget her completely." Richard sat frozen, his breathing shallow, his eyes fixed on his son as if seeing him for the first time in months, and Emma felt the weight of the moment, the fragility of this family balanced on a knife's edge, and she said, "You won't forget her, Oliver, I promise. And you know what? I bet your daddy thinks about her every single day. Sometimes grown-ups get so sad they don't know how to talk about it. They think if they stay busy and don't talk about the person they lost, it'll hurt less, but that's not true, is it?" and she glanced at Richard, whose eyes were now glassy with unshed tears, his composure cracking like ice in spring thaw, and Oliver shook his head, taking a small bite of pie, and Emma continued, "Your mommy sounds like she was an amazing woman, and I bet she'd want you and your daddy to remember her together, to talk about her, to laugh about the funny things she did, to keep her alive in your hearts." And Oliver looked at his father, really looked at him, and whispered, "Daddy, do you still think about mommy?" And Richard's breath caught, his hands trembling as he reached across the table and took his son's small hand in his own, and for the first time in 8 months, he let himself break, tears streaming down his face as he nodded and said in a voice rough with emotion, "Every second of every day, buddy, every single second. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I made you think I forgot her. I could never forget her. She was everything, and you're everything. And I've been so lost without her that I didn't know how to be your dad anymore. I didn't know how to face you, because every time I look at you, I see her, your smile, your laugh, your kindness, and it hurt so much I just shut down. But that was wrong. That was so wrong, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The restaurant had completely stopped now. Diners wiping their own eyes, waitstaff standing still, watching this raw moment of human pain and connection. And Emma, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks, stood to give them privacy. But Oliver grabbed her hand and said, "Please don't go. You helped me. You're nice. You're like how I remember mommy being warm and safe." And Richard looked at this young waitress, this stranger who'd done what he couldn't, who'd reached his son when he'd failed to, and he said hoarsely, "Thank you. I don't even know your name, but thank you." And Emma smiled through her tears and said, "I'm Emma, and you don't need to thank me. I lost my mom too, when I was 12, and I know what it's like when people stop saying her name, like she's too painful to remember. But remembering is how we honor them, how we keep them with us." And Richard nodded, wiping his face with his napkin, and for the next hour, something extraordinary happened. Ma sat with them during her break, and Oliver told stories about his mother, about the time she tried to bake cookies and burned them so badly the smoke alarm went off, about how she'd dance in the kitchen to old songs, about her laugh that sounded like music, and Richard, tentatively at first, then with growing warmth, added his own memories, about how Grace couldn't parallel park to save her life, about their first date when she spilled wine all over herself and laughed instead of being embarrassed, about how she'd wanted to be a mother more than anything in the world, and how Oliver's birth was the happiest day of her life. And slowly, painfully, beautifully, the wall between father and son began to crumble. And when they finally stood to leave, Richard insisted on leaving a $500 tip. But more than that, he asked Emma, "Would you? This is unusual, I know, but would you consider having coffee with us sometime? Oliver clearly feels comfortable with you, and I think we could both use someone who understands loss." And Emma, whose own life had been small and quiet since her mother's death, working double shifts to pay off medical bills, living alone in a tiny apartment, having long since given up on the idea that she mattered to anyone, felt something shift inside her, a door opening to let light in, and she nodded, writing her number on a napkin, and 3 days later, they met at a park, and Oliver ran straight to her, hugging her legs, and Richard, looking more relaxed in jeans and a sweater, actually smiled. And over the next few months, these meetings became regular Saturday mornings at the park, Sunday afternoon museum visits, weekday dinners where Emma taught Oliver to make his mother's favorite pasta recipe, which Richard had never learned, and slowly, the Ashford house, a massive modern mansion that had felt like a mausoleum, began to feel like a home again, with laughter echoing through the halls, with photos of Grace back on display instead of hidden away, with Oliver sleeping peacefully through the night for the first time since his mother's death, and Richard, who'd been a workaholic ghost of a father, began leaving the office early, began tucking his son in, began healing in a way he'd thought impossible. And Emma, dear Emma, who'd thought her purpose was just to serve food and pay bills, discovered that sometimes we're placed in someone's path, not by accident, but by design, that her own loss had given her the exact wisdom and compassion needed to help a broken family find their way back to each other. 6 months after that first night in the restaurant, on a crisp autumn evening, Richard invited Emma to dinner at his home, and Oliver, now vibrant and joyful, helped set the table, chattering about his day at school. And after they ate, Richard said, "Emma, I need to tell you something. When Grace was dying, she made me promise that I wouldn't let grief destroy me, that I'd make sure Oliver knew love and joy, that I'd find a way to move forward. And for 8 months, I failed that promise spectacularly. But then you came into our lives, and you didn't just help Oliver, you saved us both. You reminded me that vulnerability isn't weakness, that remembering doesn't mean staying stuck, that opening your heart again doesn't mean forgetting the person you lost. And I know this is complicated, and I'm not saying I have all the answers, but you've become family to us, and Oliver and I. We'd like you to be a permanent part of our lives, not as an employee, not as a therapist, but as someone we love, someone who belongs here." And Emma, overwhelmed, looked at Oliver, who nodded eagerly and said, "We want you to stay, Emma. You make everything better. You're like the mom I needed, and I know you're not my real mommy, and I'll never forget her. But there's room in my heart for you too. Mommy told me hearts are magic. They just get bigger when you love more people." And Emma broke down, pulling Oliver into her arms. Then Richard joined them, and they stood there. 3 people who'd been broken by loss, now bound together by love and healing. And Emma whispered, "I'd be honored. I never had a family of my own after Mom died. And you too, you've given me purpose. You've given me joy. Yes, yes, I want to stay." A year later, on the anniversary of Grace's death, the 3 of them visited her grave together, bringing sunflowers, her favorite, and Oliver, now 7.5, tall and confident and happy, said, "Mommy, I want you to know I'm okay. Daddy's okay too. We miss you every day, but we're not sad all the time anymore. Emma helps us remember you the right way, with smiles and stories, and I think you'd like her. I think you'd be glad she's taking care of us. And I promise, I'll never forget you. You're my first mommy, and you'll always be in my heart." And Richard, his arm around Emma's shoulders, added, "Grace, my love, I'll never stop loving you. But I'm learning that I can honor your memory by living, really living, not just existing. Thank you for giving me Oliver. Thank you for teaching me what love means. And I hope wherever you are, you're at peace, knowing we're going to be okay." And Emma, tears streaming down her face, said quietly, "Thank you, Grace, for raising such a beautiful soul, and for loving Richard in a way that made him the man he is. I promise I'll take care of them. I promise I'll keep your memory alive. And I promise that the love in that house will never run out." And as they walked back to the car, a black Mercedes S-Class gleaming in the sunlight, Oliver between them, holding both their hands, a gentle breeze rustled the trees, carrying the scent of flowers, and for just a moment, all 3 of them felt it, a presence, warm and approving, a sense that Grace was there, smiling, grateful that her family had found a way forward, and that love, in all its forms, had won. The story of the billionaire's son crying in a restaurant became something else entirely, a testament to the power of compassion, the healing that comes from vulnerability, the way broken people can find each other and become whole, and how sometimes the person who saves you is the one you least expect. The waitress with kind eyes and a gentle heart, who understood that what the boy needed wasn't money or distraction, but simply this: to be seen, to be heard, and to know that his mother's love would never die as long as someone cared enough to keep it alive.